Yo, what's going on everyone? It's me, it's Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day and welcome to today's video. Alright, so for today we're going to be doing a tier list for every single Pokemon game that I've ever played. All of these games had so many hours put into them, and I wish I could play more Pokemon games. I mean, over the years there were plenty of games that I completely missed, but out of all of them, these are the ones that I actually put hours into, and I really enjoyed every single one of them. But I wanted to rank them all up, because I really do think that there were some that were complete standouts, and there were others that I feel like were kind of forgettable. But at the end of the day, I really enjoy Pokemon games. I've been playing them since I was about 12 years old, and I have to say, these are the games that have made huge impacts on my life. Right now, I'm almost 40 years old, and I'm still looking forward to the next Pokemon game that's ever going to come out. And there's still a few Pokemon games that I want to try, but for one reason or another, I just haven't got around to them. Yeah, so let's jump right into it. I'm going to feel very nostalgic with this list, and yeah, I look forward to seeing how they all rank up. So yeah, let's start this off with, of course, the handheld games. This is kind of an order, like a specific order. Like first we have kind of the mainstream games in the order that I've been playing them. And then of course we have some of the spin-offs as well as the mobile games at the end. But yeah, let's start off with Pokemon Red. What can I say? This is going to be an easy S tier. I want to say it's an S plus tier, mainly because it was the first ever Pokemon game that I ever played. But for me, I think there's going to be some Pokemon games that I would say is kind of like a god tier game. So I will say that Pokemon Red, for all of its reasons, is going to be in the S tier. It is by far my favorite Pokemon game because it's the first one that I ever played. It's the game that introduced me to the world of Pokemon Go and Pokemon in general. And yeah, if you were not around when Pokemon first came out, I have to tell you, it was an experience. Like, it was crazy how many people were playing Pokemon games. Like, people would bring their Game Boys to school. Around that time, I was in middle school, and people would be trading Pokemon with each other. Like, I remember going to Sunday school, like going to church and being the coolest kid because I had all 150 Pokemon entries. And it was awesome. Like, people would ask for certain Pokemon because they would have Pokemon Blue, and I had Pokemon Red. So we would always link up and trade. It was such an awesome experience. It was breathtaking. And I feel like nothing like that will ever happen again. So yeah, Pokemon Red, starting off, easy S tier. But let's move on to Pokemon Yellow. Now this one was kind of weird because it was basically kind of like a complete version of Pokemon Red and Blue, but not a lot of players actually paid attention to it. They kind of designed it in a way of the anime. Like, I think it was trying to cash in on the success of the anime version of Pokemon. And it was fine. Like, it was fun. I think at the time, everyone who was a fan of Pokemon was also a fan of the Pokemon anime. So getting kind of like a anime experience was, you know, it was serviceable, basically. But yeah, because you didn't have your companions, Brock and Misty, it just didn't feel like the actual anime experience. But it was really cool that you could have Pikachu as a companion, and you can kind of go along the story, like an abridged version of the story with you as the main character and with Pikachu by your side, and you would actually come across Jesse and James as well. So there was some interesting stuff with it. But overall, I will say that it was a B tier. I felt like it did not live up to what it was like playing Pokemon Red and Blue. But yeah, it's certainly up there. Next up, we got Pokemon Silver. That was the version that I went with back in the day. I did not have both Silver and Gold, but I had Pokemon Silver. I'm gonna put it in the A tier. It was a great experience having new Pokemon that you could collect. And overall, I felt like it was a lot of fun. Like, save for what it is, I really enjoyed Pokemon Silver when it came out. But it did kind of feel like Pokemon was starting to die off a little bit, like from its initial hype. But yeah, Pokemon Silver was still definitely fun, and nobody that I knew had Pokemon Gold, and I kind of wish that I was a grown adult at the time with my own job, because I definitely would have bought both games and traded to myself. But yeah, that is beside the point. I still continued to play Pokemon into my college years, and that is when Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire came out. For me, they're going to be in the A tier. I really enjoyed Pokemon Ruby. My brother, I believe, had Pokemon Sapphire, so we were still able to trade with each other, but I was, of course, going with the Ruby version. I tend to go towards the red versions of every game, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. But there was, of course, kind of like the complete version, and that was Pokemon Emerald. This one, I'm also gonna put in the A tier. Much of the same reasons as Pokemon Yellow version. I felt like it didn't necessarily have the same experience, but it was still a lot of fun, and I still really enjoyed it. Next up, we of course have Fire Red. That was another really great experience. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like, you know, the first HD remake of Pokemon Red. I did enjoy it for that, so I will say that it is going to be an A tier. Alright, now we're going to move on to what I consider as my favorite generation of Pokemon. That is, of course, the Diamond and Pearl era. I, of course, went with Diamond. For me, that's going to be an S tier. I really enjoyed Pokemon Diamond when it first came out. I felt like I missed a couple generations. Actually, I think I only missed one generation. But I had a lot of fun with it. Like, it felt like, I think at that point I was graduated from college, maybe. Or maybe around the time that, like, I was around like my early 20s, I felt like it was my return to Pokemon, because I think there was a couple of years since Pokemon Ruby where I kind of stopped playing Pokemon, and then Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It felt very fresh, it felt very new, but there was some familiar elements in it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then of course, Pokemon Platinum came out. This one for me was probably my first foray into competitive Pokemon gameplay. Like, I was doing all sorts of hardcore things with Pokemon Platinum. Like, I was hatching so many different eggs with the Masuda method, trying to get shinies. It was probably the one time where I grinded a mainstream game so hardcore. Like, I really enjoyed Pokemon Platinum, and I feel like I couldn't get into the next line of games in the mainstream games because I don't think any of them could live up to Pokemon Platinum. And then on top of that, I did not have the handhelds for those games, mainly because I just simply did not want to, I don't know. I was kind of going through a phase at the time. I think I was playing a lot of like League of Legends at the time, so I was just putting a lot of my money and time into that, so I didn't end up getting a Nintendo DS. But still, Pokemon Platinum was just so much fun. Actually, Pokemon Platinum was a DS game, what am I saying? But you know what I'm saying. Like, yeah, I think after Pokemon Platinum, that was kind of like the last Pokemon game that I played in a while, so yeah, didn't actually jump into the next line of mainstream games. Until, of course, I got myself a Switch, and with that Switch, Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu. For me, this is going to be a B tier experience. I really enjoyed Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu when it first came out, but I also felt like, again, it felt like an abridged version of the original Pokemon games. I didn't necessarily feel like it captured a lot of the same magic. I know some people will disagree with me on that. I think a lot of people really enjoyed Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, but for me, it was just kind of like a nice little nostalgia trip. But aside from that, it didn't really feel like a special experience. It was, of course, the first Pokemon mainstream game that hit a console. And I think that was pretty groundbreaking because when it comes to Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, it was a lot of fun to actually play it on my TV. But a lot of the times that I was playing it, it was actually on the handheld. So I don't know. It is what it is. I think it really fit the model of what a Switch was supposed to be. That, you know, if you want to play it at home on a TV, you had a great experience. But if you want to take it off and then play it as a handheld, like on the bus, you could do that as well. It was pretty good for that. And on top of that, the Pokemon Go integration was also a huge plus. Getting yourself Meltans and getting yourself a Melmetal, I thought that was a really cool gimmick. So yeah, really enjoyed it, but it's not going to be in the upper tiers. Next up, we got Pokemon Sword. I'm gonna say it's a C tier for me. I mean, when it comes to the Switch generation of games, I have to tell you, like, they were fun, but they did require a good amount of time, and time is not something that I really had to spare. So I think for me, like, I dabbled in it, I played it enough, and I got enough enjoyment out of it, but I really feel like I didn't play it as hard as the other mainstream games that you see up here. Still a really good game, don't get me wrong. I thought it was pretty well polished. But yeah, I will say that it kind of fell off at that point. I was looking for more casual, like, I guess, more, I don't know, experiences like Pokemon Go at that point. So, yeah. And another game that I dabbled with a little bit is Pokemon Scarlet. I unfortunately did not play it all the way through. It's going to be a D tier for me. I feel like a lot of the bugs and glitches, I kind of have an older Switch, so it did not handle it really well. I just felt like it was a big distraction. I still had fun with it. I still got familiar with a lot of the Paldean Pokemon, but I don't know. It just wasn't something that I dedicated more than 2 hours to, I'll admit that. Still a lot of fun. I feel like I should go back and continue playing it, but that's going to be a bridge I'm going to cross at a later date. But yeah. Alright, next up we got the Pokémon games. Now, something that I need to let you know about, I am a huge fan of fighting games. It's the genre of games that I grew up with. I played nothing but Tekken, Tekken Tag, Soul Calibur, Marvel vs. Capcom. All of those games were the games that I grew up with. So of course, I was naturally super hyped that there's going to be a fighting game with Pokemon. I thought that was mind-blowing. So when Pokémon Tournament first came out, I put so many hours into it. It was probably one of the only Wii U games that I played most religiously, but it did fall off quite a bit. So I'm actually gonna put this in the B tier. Actually, I think I still have it. So most of the console games back there, I played quite extensively, but this one, Pokémon Tournament, the first one, I definitely dedicated the most hours to that out of all my Wii U games. Oh, my chair is squeaking. Yeah, so for me, that's going to be a B tier. I feel like it could be in the higher tiers, but it did fall off quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, it had a good run, but yeah. Now, of course, we got Pokémon Tournament, I think it's DX. GX, oh my gosh, that was a disaster. I'm actually gonna put this in the trash tier. What a disappointment that was. I think a lot of players will live and die by this game. Like, they say it's one of the greatest games ever made. But for me, I felt like at that point, the whole idea of like a Pokemon fighting game just kind of fell off for me. I think maybe I just put too much of that energy into the first Pokémon Tournament game. But by the time I went and tried Pokémon Tournament GX, or whatever the sequel is for the Switch, it kind of felt like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was Tekken versus, was it Tekken versus Street Fighter? Or no, I think there was a crossover game that involved Tekken, and I don't think it was Street Fighter, but, oh God, I don't even remember, but there was a fighting game crossover that was so hype, and then once you played it, it was trash. And I felt like that's what this game was. There was so much hype around this game, especially for fans of the original Pokémon Tournament, but I just felt like as soon as I played it, I was like, oh, this is not as good as I thought it would be. So I don't know. There's going to be a lot of people in the comments that are going to disagree with me, because like I said, there's some diehard fans of this game, and there's a lot of people who play it hardcore, but just for me, it just wasn't something that really stuck with me. So for me, it's going to be a trash tier game, unfortunately. All right, now we're moving on to the spin-offs. Well, technically we're already in the spin-offs, but Pokemon Snap, that is a game that is god tier. Oh my goodness. For the original N64, man, when that game came out, it created such a stir within the Pokemon community. Like, people were running to Blockbuster to get their pictures printed. It was insane when Pokemon Snap came out. Like, oh my goodness. I had so much fun with the original Pokemon Snap. I could not believe the experience was, I mean, I don't know. Like, it was just something that I really cannot share in words. Like, Pokemon Snap, wow, I'm gonna be saying Pokken for the rest of this video. But Pokemon Snap, when it first came out, I feel like every single one of my friends were playing it. It was something that, you know, we would go to each other's houses and like kind of challenge each other's to get the best scores for like the best Mew picture. You know, it was so many cool things about Pokemon Snap that I just feel like you can't replicate it anymore. Like, even with the new Pokemon Snap game that came out, yes, I really want to play it. I feel like it's a dream game for me, something that I've always wanted, like a sequel to the original Pokemon Snap, but I still feel like you cannot have the same experiences. And I think the best way they could replicate it is if they have that peripheral where you could actually go and get your pictures printed out physically. I think that would be such a cool experience. Like, maybe that's a bit of a missed opportunity. Maybe there was something like that and I just wasn't aware of it, but I think that would have been really cool. I don't know what it was about the original Pokemon Snap, but it was so god tier when it comes to a Pokemon game. I feel like everyone just wanted to experience it. So yeah, for me, that's an easy S+ tier. All right, next up, we got Pokemon Stadium. This is going to be an S tier. And the reason why I feel like this game was such a hyped up game at the time was, of course, because, well, it was the first time we could experience Pokemon battles, specifically the Pokemon that you had in your console or your handheld games, in like a console form. It was kind of like I don't know, it was kind of like, I guess it laid the foundation for what would eventually be like Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu, Pokemon Sword and Shield, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. You know, it was something that players were hungry for, playing Pokemon battles on a console. So yeah, I would have to say Pokemon Stadium is groundbreaking, and at the time I had so much fun with it. And of course, a lot of the side activities with it was also a lot of fun, so it did offer you quite a lot. But I feel like for me, it was, again, it was an experience. I feel like that's the one thing about Pokemon. They always provide experiences, some unique things that you wouldn't get with any other game franchise, and Pokemon Stadium was definitely that. So yeah, next let's move on to Pokemon Shuffle. This was actually, in my opinion, a very underrated Pokemon mobile game. I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I actually dedicated a lot of hours to it. It was basically like I think it was like a match 3 with Pokemon emojis. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a great time killer. Like, before Pokemon Go, this was, in my opinion, the best mobile game that we had in the Pokemon franchise. Some people will say it's the Pokemon TCG mobile game, but I personally think it's the Pokemon Shuffle game. If you haven't tried it out, I feel like you should. You'll actually really enjoy it. All right, next up, we got the Magikarp Hop game. I forgot what it was called, Magikarp Jump. For me, this was a C tier. It was fun when it first came out. I think it was kind of like a fun little game that everyone was playing, but you know, it died off really quickly. It was a spin-off game featuring Magikarp. Everyone loves Magikarp. I think it did its job, but yeah, C tier for me. Pokemon Masters. Or I should say Pokemon Masters EX, because they changed it. This one's going to be a B tier for me. In case you didn't know, there was a time where I was actually making content for Pokemon Masters EX. The thing is with this game, I feel like it is a gacha game, and it falls under the same criticisms of a gacha game. If you're not spending money, if you're not putting in a lot of resources and time into this game, you're gonna fall behind. And that was my big problem with it. I really enjoyed Pokemon Masters EX until I started to not catch up with all the new releases of Pokemon trainers. And a lot of those trainers were meta at the time. I think for me, the time where I stopped playing was around the time that Red was introduced. I did end up getting Red, but then I found out that they were doing stuff like, I don't know, just bringing in so many different characters and just not being able to keep up with it is why I kind of fell off from the game. So yeah, but at the very least, it was a very fun game. I thought they did a really good job with it. It definitely was a fun gacha game in the Pokemon universe, for what it's worth. All right, and that leads us to the final game, and of course, this is the game that I've probably spent the most hours playing throughout my entire life, and that is, of course, Pokemon Go. Where am I gonna put it? Where am I gonna put it? I'm, of course, gonna put it in the S+ tier. Yeah, for what it's worth, I have my gripes with Pokemon Go. I have my gripes with Niantic. But let's be real here. Pokemon Go is the GOAT when it comes to Pokemon games. A lot of people will disagree with me on that. I think some people will say that it's any of the mainstream games. Some people will say it's the original Pokemon Red. I will agree with you. It is technically my favorite Pokemon game, even though I would say that I've had better experiences with other games. But let's be real here. Pokemon Go is the GOAT when it comes to the Pokemon franchise. It's made the most money for both the Pokemon Company as well as Nintendo, I'm sure. It is the one game that has just launched Pokemon as a franchise into a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, everyone was playing Pokemon Go when it first came out. It was an amazing game when it first launched. Yes, over time, there have been so many different design decisions that Niantic has made that a lot of players would disagree with. Of course, the game itself has kind of fallen off over the years, but I really still enjoy Pokemon Go. I feel like that's the one game that's going to be the staple game moving forward. I think a lot of people, when they think of Pokemon, they're going to think about Pokemon Go. They're going to naturally be like, oh yeah, Pokemon Go was a huge part of it. And I just personally feel like, at the end of the day, in spite of all of its flaws, Pokemon Go is a really well-designed game. It brought the experience of being an actual Pokemon trainer into real life, and I feel like no other game could accomplish that. So yeah, for what it's worth, I will always have a place in my heart for Pokemon Go. I know that sounds very cheesy, that sounds very tacky, but I really enjoy this game at the end of the day. I have so many problems with it. I want only for it to succeed. Any criticism that I have for Pokemon Go and Niantic, it's all dedicated towards making this one game succeed. Any of the mainstream games, with all of their flaws, they will come and go, like Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet obviously have a lot of criticisms behind it. They obviously have a lot of problems with it, but again, it's a game that's going to come and go. They pretty much only exist to introduce new Pokemon into the Pokemon franchise, in my opinion. I know some people will be vehemently disagreeing with that, but that's just how I view them. I think the mainstream games, for what they're worth, they're always going to be fun in different ways, but that's pretty much it. They just exist to introduce new Pokemon and new mechanics, I suppose. But yeah, Pokemon Go, however, has always been kind of a staple game, and I think it's going to continue to be so. Yeah, so there you have it. These are every single one of the Pokemon games that I've ever played, and I really enjoyed every single one of them. I think there's quite a few Pokemon games that I do want to try. I mentioned earlier that I want to try out the new Switch version of Pokemon Snap. I definitely want to try that. Pokemon Legends Arceus, that is a game that has been on the back burner for a very long time. I'm anticipating the days that I end up playing that. Again, it comes down to the amount of time that I have. I do not have much to spare lately, so if I can find myself some time, I'm definitely going to go back and put some hours into some of these games. I'm also going to be trying out new Pokemon games, and who knows, maybe in the future this list will look a lot bigger. I know compared to a lot of other people, I haven't tried out that many Pokemon games over the years. I mean, there's so many that I just feel like if I were to be able to play every single Pokemon game, I would have to live 500 years, you know, because there's like Detective Pikachu, like all the mainstream games that I skipped. There's of course all the spin-off games like Pokemon Dungeons, and oh my gosh, there's just so many Pokemon games, and a lot of them are obviously inaccessible at this point unless you use an emulator, but I really hope eventually I could play more Pokemon games because, like I said, I had so many crazy, unique experiences with just these games alone. Just imagine all the experiences I missed out on by playing all the other Pokemon games that ever existed. So, yeah, hopefully my library of played Pokemon games will expand in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see. And I'm also looking forward to other Pokemon games that the Pokémon Company and other companies like Niantic are going to create in the future. Who knows, maybe there'll be a Pokemon 2 eventually, but yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I said in this video down below. Do you feel like this video is completely off base? Did you play these Pokemon games and you would rank them completely differently? I would like to know those thoughts down below. And yeah, let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this tier list video. If you ended up enjoying it, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And also don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you play Pokemon Go and you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon, because for all of my paid Patreon members, they get a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. And when it comes to remote raids and the friendship system, I always prioritize my Patreon supporters. So if you want to play Pokemon Go with me, that's the best way you can do so. Make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way, you can do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow, and let's interact with each other. Alright, and that's going to be it. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.